there will never ever be another movie like Shrek.
Ogres are like onions.
They stink?
Yes. No.
If you think about it plainly, it has a pretty basic formula. There's this dude, for whatever reason, be it superficial or otherwise, he's hated and detested by everyone. He was really the right man for the job. He's manipulated. He does the job, and he doesn't feel like he deserves any reward for the job based on who he is and what society imposed upon him. At the end of the day, his true love, the person he falls into, loves him back and sees him as his true self, not just what society deems him as. And boom! Happily ever after. It's not a formula that screams novelty or screams something crazy, but still, I say this, yet there will never ever be another movie like Shrek. I don't normally make videos on like Disney or DreamWorks type movies, but that might all change. I love the animation medium, be it anime, cartoons, or, you know, other good content. I'm not talking about the mile-a-minute garbage being spewed out by most companies these days. I'm talking about the classics. And this isn't going to be a classic Shrek review. You could see that other places, and if you want me to do a No One Understands Shrek video, you could definitely let me know in the comments. Today I wanted to talk about something very, very different. I keep seeing all these controversies in newer shows like She-Hulk or, you know, Velma. I cry.
You know what 420 is, right?
Yeah. It's code for adults who still watch cartoons.
And these are obviously extreme examples of it, but there are cases time and time again of how progressivism actually ruins the movies that they're trying to, you know, promote this level of progressivism. Every time they make a joke, oh, well, if I was white, I would have also murdered someone just to get away with it, which is an actual joke they tell in Velma. It just makes me kind of want to gag. In my opinion, that's not how you tell a good story or promote any form of moral to the story. Shrek is an amazing story because it's all about diversity. And it's all about accepting someone for who they are, not based on the color of their skin or whatever race they are. It starts off with our Lord and Savior, Lord Farquaad Markiplier, absolute legendary antagonist, if I do say so myself, rounding up all of the mythical, magical, mystical creatures, putting them all in jails, and this is just pure basic discrimination. Like, this is the most obvious form of it. You hate them because of what they are, what they were born as, not because of who they are. It's a mythical world, and it's something that you can actually see, disturbing though it may sound, that someone in our normal, grounded in reality world actually would do.
I see good things about Hitler also.
For whatever reason, there is this massive discriminatory outcry and outburst against these fairy tale creatures because they are different. That is literally discrimination to a freaking T. Comparing that to the discrimination you see in a lot of more recent movies, it's clearly racially based, and they like painting one side as the enemy.
Narc! Narc! White girl with too much money?
Now, I don't want to make this whole thing a woke type situation. I just want to really hammer down how Shrek handled this so much better, and I think Shrek does a better job teaching you to be anti-discrimination, to accept people for who they are, much more than the clearly agenda-pushing stories that you see today. Because despite the fact that all of this horrible discrimination is happening in Shrek, they never once say that all humans are culpable for these crimes. It's just the humans that commit the crimes that wind up being held accountable and being culpable. Compare that for just a second to like modern television where you have lines like, oh my God, maybe all men are the problem. And it's like, that's not the moral of the story here, unless it is the moral of the story in a lot of modern television. Anyway, this aside, enter Shrek. Now, this is a very interesting character. Shrek is fantastic because since society deemed him as a monster, he started to view himself as a monster. The get out of my swamp mindset is very strong in him, to the point that even someone like Donkey, he doesn't want him around either. He feels better off being alone. Donkey is a character that sees Shrek as the person he is instead of as an ogre. However, Shrek is still not willing to open up and get closer to him because of the really horrible crushing weight that society put on him, that everyone will always see him as a monster. Now, this is a very interesting perspective and mindset to tackle discrimination. Now you're tackling discrimination from the mental health perspective of the party that's being discriminated against, and not immediately saying, oh, well, you know, his problem is that everyone else is evil. His problem is that he bought into their lies and sees himself as a monster too. It's very infrequently that we actually get this very introspective look at how damaging discrimination can be to someone's self-esteem And we see that in Shrek. We see Shrek as this dude, this ogre who sees himself as a monster and not someone that can ever actually make friends that appreciate him. He can only make people scared of him. The amount of times we see him monologue throughout the movie that I don't deserve the princess. I am just an ogre. I am a monster. He actually starts to believe it himself, and all of horrible names that society put on him and these labels that society viewed him as is how he saw who he actually is too. That is such a cripplingly tragic viewpoint and such a valid one that again, you do not see anymore today. Now it's just blaming everyone else. Whenever I see a modern iteration of something like this, the party that's being discriminated towards is always going to be the super mega headstrong, gonna take everyone else down mindset, and we don't actually see how it could be even more destructive than just from the perspective of the villains. So, now that I've kind of established these two extremely cool viewpoints, you know, we got how the evil, racist human people in the Shrek world are seeing fairy tale creatures, so they are discriminating, and now we see the mental health decline and rapid introspection, downward spiral from the party that was discriminated against. Immediately, this blows every of its contemporary pieces trying to tell the same story completely out of the water. And you don't have this kind of storytelling in any of the modern stories, but it even gets better than this as the show goes on. Yes, we start to see how the human people are corrupt. Yes, Shrek begins to realize that he is worthwhile. When the story reaches its climax, skip through the entire story, you know what happens in Shrek? He goes in, he saves the princess, he grabs the princess wants to see him. He's not even willing to show himself to the princess. Why? Because he's a monster. He views himself as a monster. If he was comfortable with himself, he'd have no problem. But no! The story continues to hammer that down. He has this couple more monologues. She starts actually liking him as a person. She has decided to wed with Farquaad, and here's the coolest thing. We don't get her saving his life immediately and saying, you know what, Farquaad, I don't want to marry you because you look too much like Markiplier. I want to marry Shrek because he looks like a Meat Canyon character. No, he doesn't have that. He needs to dig himself out of his pit first. He needs to be the one to say, you know what, I'm gonna break into this wedding and I am gonna say I object. This is the moment where he starts recognizing that he is someone that is worthy of love and that is worthy to not be discriminated against, and that he is a person just like anyone else. He is not to be labeled as a monster. So it takes him making the steps, the necessary steps to dig himself out of this mental pit that he threw himself into in order for him to say, I object, and for Fiona to say that she actually loves him back because she sees him for who he is. This ties an extremely nice bow to a story that quite frankly is a masterpiece at dissecting the terror and horror of discrimination while not being so dark, heavy, and dreary, and keeping it lighthearted throughout the entire movie as well. I personally think Shrek is an absolute masterpiece, but here's the part that I wanted to save for a little later in the video. This is the going out of order part. We, the viewers, have been watching this story from the perspective of Lord Farquaad, the guy that wants to wipe out all the fairy tale creatures, marry the princess, blah, blah, blah. He's a small penis, we know. And we saw this from the perspective of Shrek, someone who is being discriminated against, someone who started to view himself as lesser, someone who did all the work and all the journey for none of the glory, started to see himself as worth something, go get that princess and have the princess make the decision. It's from the perspective of Fiona. We got to see her wrestle with her feelings, her decide on how to interpret the prophecy that would decide which prince or whatever she ends up deciding to marry. And we see her taking the brave steps of deciding, you know what? Screw my interpretation of the prophecy. I would rather be an ogre, but be with the person I love, than be a human and be with the human toadstool. What about Donkey's perspective? Donkey, the character who originally approached Shrek, the only character in the entire series whose eyes were not at all, even a little bit tainted by discrimination. Everyone else was. The only character in the show whose eyes were never, ever, not even once, clouded by any shred of discrimination or societal norms or any of that garbage. That's the one that caused the biggest twist of all time. There was one character that every single person, even in the audience, discriminated against. There is a character that not even a single person could have possibly predicted how that character would impact the narrative, because we watched this movie from some sort of discriminatory perspective as well. We also believed in all these tropes. We also believed that the princess is gonna be guarded by this evil fire-breathing dragon. We didn't even for a moment open our eyes and heart like Donkey and expect the dragon to become a good guy. Ladies and gentlemen, Shrek broke every possible trope and managed to look at this societal issue from every possible vantage point, to the point that even the viewers were fooled to a degree. Because, come on, obviously the dragon is guarding the princess. He's gonna be like the evil guy that the knight has to slay, blah, 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 blah. But no, even we were fooled due to our prejudice against this because of its ancestors in other pieces of fiction. This is how you tell a discrimination story so right. And this is why there will never, ever be another movie like Shrek. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Leave a like, subscribe, share this video to everyone, goddammit, because I want everyone to see this video, especially whoever's writing Marvel Phase 6. Holy moly. Anyway, stay weird, fam.